Director, Hospice A Helping Hand. And planning commissioner for the city.
Someone do my graphics?
Elizabeth Grable, Reliable Billing, EDC, Bob Borton.
West Branch Visitors Bureau and Chamber, DDA.
Ford Conference Center Sales Coordinator.
Scott Bell, Lapham Associates, West Branch Township Planning Commission, Ogama County Planning Commission, Chamber, Parks and Rec. Yeah.
Woohoo! Thanks, Scott, for not making me feel lonely.
I'm gonna know all Scott's by the end of this. I'll be able to do his. So.
They change
I
regularly.
forgot Chamber.
And I'm Ben Muldrow with Arnett Muldrow and Associates.
Alan Bruder at Mercantile Bank.
Roseanne Harriman here on Community Bank.
Our newest person in the room is Conrad Westreiner.
Our newest member of town. Awesome.
So usually I make everyone sign a media release. Is it okay? Is everyone fine with me just writing down names and I can use that? Is that okay?
You should just have those.
I don't know about that, Mandy.
Check off that we're here.
I do need, I'm gonna send a sign-up sheet around. If you have any suggestions or things.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump on in if that's okay with everybody. First of all, thank you all for coming out 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. As you can tell, for those of you that haven't met me, you can probably infer from my accent that I'm from a little farther south than here. You know, the Blissfield, Michigan area. No, I'm just kidding. I'm born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina. We own an urban planning firm that's based out of there. I now live in Delaware, but we're doing all of the branding services for the Project Rising Tide. We were able to work with 5 of the communities in round 1, Grayling, Harrison, Sandusky, River Rouge, and Hillsdale. And so far in round 2, we're working with Beaverton, Gladwin, you guys here in West Branch, and Manistee. And over the course of my career, I've had the privilege of working with 25 or so communities here in the state of Michigan, and we've developed brand systems for over 600 communities in 40 states. So this is literally what I do every day. I'm going community to community. I'm talking to them about the things that they're trying to accomplish and trying to help create a toolbox that allows all these different organizations in a community to better leverage their resources to make an impact. So I'm going to share with you a little bit what I learned and what I saw while I was here, and then some suggestions on things that I feel like West Branch could use moving forward. Anytime you work in Michigan, you have to be very deliberate about the differences between cities and townships and counties and all that stuff. So I think one of the big things that I want to reiterate is, as we're going through this process, we are looking at both destination identity as well as organizational brands. So when we are talking about the destination of West Branch, visitors don't really care where corporate boundaries are. So we want to make sure that there's an identity for the entire community as a destination, something that the business community can use and build brand equity in. But then we also want to have identities for those organizations that are out there with a particular target audience, with particular task, and with, you know, goals that they're trying to accomplish. And I think we'll make that pretty clear as I go through the process. Stop me at any point. I'm recording the presentation. We're going to make this entire link available tomorrow on YouTube, so folks that couldn't join us can still tap in and take a look. But I just want to jump right in. The first thing that I always like to do is I like to look at some of the logos that exist. There's not a tremendous amount of continuity, and it was almost one of those things where if we were ever struggling, we'd just put the smiley face water tower on it. And, I don't think that surprises anybody. You see a little bit of continuity of color and things like that. But this is a collection of everything from the Downtown DDA, Chamber of Commerce, Visitors Bureau from their website, kind of a buy local, open for business campaign, the city crest, all the way to the county EDC. So again, no real coordination between those two. I want to be very, very clear here. It is important that individual organizations can preserve their individuality. Here, I'll throw some. Hey. So we want to make sure that we can acknowledge the fact that we have these different organizations, but we also want to have some sort of connectivity between those. Now, the other thing that became very, very clear very quickly is there was a series of themes. And believe it or not, the citizens of West Branch were not shy about having opinions on what they thought was a good idea and a bad idea. That might shock some of you, but we know we've got the smiley face water tower. We know that we've got the Victorian theme that has been around for a very, very long time and went so far as to even make its way into the building codes and the sign standards. So, but then also has kind of backed off a little. And then we have a newer emerging theme around Bigfoot. Now, I'm sure that everyone here has an opinion on each one of those. But here's the good thing that I really want to try to talk to you about as you see this presentation. We're not picking a theme. Communities are extremely diverse. They have diverse goals. They have diverse initiatives. And we are trying to create a stage that allows this community to tell its best story in each circumstance it might find itself in. When you try to go through and you try to apply a singular theme to everything, you end up cutting your own arms off. You can't really be as dynamic as you want to be because you're so busy trying to figure out how to force it into one of those things. So we're not going to throw anything that exists away, but we're also going to create a system that really works together at being versatile and expandable. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so let's start with smiley face. I come from South Carolina. I grew up right next to a community called Gaffney, South Carolina. Is anybody familiar with Gaffney? What do you know about Gaffney? Anything about a water tower stick out? They have a giant peach. But from the interstate, it doesn't look like a peach. It looks like a really large butt. So you can imagine all of the nicknames that might have created for Gaffney along the way. Automatically when I come in, you've got to consider this is an amenity. I am not going to recommend that anybody repaint the water tower. That is not a conversation for the branding process in any way, shape, or form. But there was something interesting that I found that I felt like it was important to share. I did a simple Google search on smiley face water tower, and there are websites dedicated to tracking smiley face water towers. There's a whole list of smiley face water towers from all over the country. The descriptions of them are absolutely fantastic. So I would take, if you ever get just a really down time where you need to entertain yourselves, Google smiley face water tower and go to the site. This is Minnesota, Nebraska, New Jersey, North Dakota, Texas, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, California, South Carolina. So, they're all over the place. The thing that really blew my mind, though, there are 6 just in the state of Michigan. So what that really said to me loud and clear was, I know why people gravitate towards the image, because they feel like it's unique and they want that quick trigger for uniqueness. But even in your own state, there are 5 other communities that are trying to use that same tactic. So we don't want to put all our eggs in that basket, obviously, but we do want to be clever. We can use this connection to our benefit, and I've got some ideas for that. The second one is Victorian. Now, Victorian's kind of a weird thing. Victorian is a time period, and it was a time period during the reign of Queen Victoria. So Queen Victoria reigned for 64 years. This was her in her earlier tenure. as she, began to age. And by the end of the Victorian era, even Victoria was tired of the Victorian era. So there are a lot of things that get classified as Victorian architecture when they're actually different variations of architecture. The weird thing is, if you look into it at all, if you're still into Victorian in 2019, they now call it steampunk. So there's these weird variations of figuring out how do we make this work. I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I really took from this was it's not as much about a Victorian theme as it is a focus on our history and on historic preservation. The community can continue to be historic and focused on preservation without having everything run through a Victorian filter. Does that make sense? When you really dig into the things that are thought to be Victorian style architecture, most of those elements are elements that come out of residential architecture, far more so than our commercial architecture. So this really is I think that thing that I heard loud and clear is we don't want to walk away from our history. And I'm completely on board with that. And then the last is the Bigfoot. And believe it or not, this is not at all the first time that I've worked with a community that has some sort of Sasquatch. It's actually shocking how many communities I have worked with that have some sort of Sasquatch. I was sharing with folks earlier this week about a community in Virginia called Norton, Virginia. That's the home of a Bigfoot-like character known as the Wood Booger. So not only do you have the somewhat odd silhouette of a Yeti everywhere, but you also have this crazy name, the Wood Booger. So from my standpoint, if the Bigfoot push is helping businesses to make money, that's one thing, and that's good, and businesses should be making money. We want them to be prosperous here. But I think people get nervous about it becoming an all adopted theme. It's like, oh gosh, are we going to end up with Bigfoot footprints on our streetscape, and are we going to have people dressed up in Bigfoot costumes coming to ribbon cuttings and things like that? So there's a very, very interesting role that I think Bigfoot can play as more of a guerrilla style marketing campaign. And I said that last night to the merchants, and I didn't intend it to be pun, but it's this kind of cool, edgy, underground side thing. But you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket, because then all of a sudden it becomes hokey. So one of the first things that I'm truly recommending to you all is acknowledging these three things that you have invested time and effort in, and simply evolving those into concepts that are actually more broad brush. It's not about the smiley face water tower. It is about the warmness, the friendliness, that personal connection that you get here. It's not about Victorian as much as it is about a quaint, small town, historic downtown, a place that feels different because how it looks and because of the stories that it has. And then the Bigfoot really is this segue into converting outdoor recreation to be an economic catalyst for our community. And as I talk about that, I'm going to be very, very deliberate. I'm a little bit selfish when it comes to outdoor resources. I don't want people using our stuff unless they're giving us their money. So making sure that we are preparing to grow economically from increased awareness and access to our outdoor recreation, I think is essential. So with that, that's kind of our summary of where I feel like we are and where we're kind of moving. And that moves us into the brand elements. So the first place I always like to start is with the typeface. And I had created a series of typefaces. We had a great drop-in on Monday night over at the brewery where folks came in, kind of took a look at some of the variations. And what we really landed on is we landed on a 2 typeface system where the primary typeface is a very, very clean, traditional serif typeface. And then the secondary is what's called a slab serif. The slab serif gives us a little bit of meat, gives us a little bit of kind of riding that line between traditional and contemporary. But you will notice neither one of these would be considered Victorian typefaces. Neither one of these would have hair coming out of them like they're coming out of the, Bigfoot, or they're not made of logs, or they don't have smiley faces in every circle. They're not themed. They're intended to be connective tissue in our messaging. Then from there, we started to look at our color palette. And what we did is we adopted, or we're recommending, a 2-part color palette, a primary and secondary color palette. And the primary color palette, 6 colors at the top, comes from a series of blues and browns and greens, and we wanted to be able to connect in kind of a yellow, just knowing that that was a color that we see a good bit. And then in that secondary color palette, we've got some slightly more vibrant versions and just some additional colors to expand that spectrum. But one of the interesting things that this color palette does is it creates connective tissue between things that are already going on. All 3 colors from the wayfinding system are incorporated into this color palette. So we know that we can move forward using this, and they will have a color connection with that infrastructure that we're investing in. But it also gives us the opportunity with a 10 color selection to be able to allow individual organizations to kind of hone in on a couple and have those colors be theirs. So it gives us a lot of variety and expansion. So then from there, a couple words that came out from a value standpoint: warm, friendly, small town, connected, north, outdoors, historic, and proud. And I will say, proud might have a little bit of an asterisk there. Proud knowing that we have to constantly stoke that pride. Pride is not a thing that just exists without any effort. It's something that we have to continually invest in and earn. So with that, what that kind of carries me to is the creation of a little brand narrative. I call it a brand statement. And what it does is it takes some of the things that we heard from you all and it turns it into a statement that helps us get down to that big picture storyline. So I'm going to read that for you now. We are West Branch, Michigan, and we are proud of this place that we call home. For many, we are simply a quick stop on your way to somewhere else. But down the hill and hidden around the bend lies a historic downtown, flush with locally owned shops, one-of-a-kind restaurants, a movie theater, a brewery, a tasting room, and more. We are proud to be that place where down south becomes up north. We love our natural surroundings and are blessed to be the stewards of the breathtaking beauty and the home of the perfect escape. We are focused on being a warm, welcoming community. Many might connect us with a smile, and we take that approach to heart. We are a great place to live, learn, and grow. We invite you to discover West Branch and all the amazing things we have to offer. Discover our heart, experience our smile, and feel what it is like to be treated like a local. Explore our home and you'll understand what we mean by West Branch, up north never felt so close. So that simple concept of up north, the proximity of up north, but also the interpersonal connection. And what you start to see with the emergence of this destination brand is you start to see a system that uses very, very simple and clean images to start to create something that's expandable and something that can really grow. So I want to point out a couple things. I'm throwing a lot of different ideas out your way. I've got this one line of up north never felt so close. I've got one that says up north, down home. And then I have one that I really like that simply says live happy. And the live happy clusters with that acronym of the WB. You can see that although I'm using trees now, I've designed the logo in a way where that icon truly becomes an icon-based system where the image can change out. It can evolve over time. It can be interest related. So you can see taking that live happy concept and being able to go out and tie it in to different passion-driven interests that might bring people into the community or might lead our own regional locals to come back and explore our community. So you create a system where you can truly expand that over and over again. And you can notice down at the very bottom, it's got, whoops, thank you. It's got a little hashtag that simply says West Branch, and then it includes the little word type smiley face. That's a simple way that you can connect back to those things without trying to have everybody wear bright yellow shirts with smiley faces on them, you know? So being able to have something that has that foundation. Now, this really is starting to do some of that overall community work, but how do we get historic into it? How do we talk about the fact that there's a whole part of town that people don't know exists when they stop and they might see the outlets and they might go to Hamburger Hill? So we wanted to create an adaptation for downtown West Branch. So we're starting to show how those different adaptations might exist. You could simply refer to that as historic West Branch. I've got one that says historic. I've got one that says downtown. I'm going to be really honest with you. People are funny. They don't always connect the dots. There are a lot of people that might go to an outlet mall and a Walmart Supercenter and think that they have discovered downtown. But they know that things don't necessarily feel historic. So being able to have those variations in your messaging, I think, will be really, really important for you as you start to tell that story. Then from there, I just wanted to play around. I think one of the big things that we really talk about with branding, and I think sometimes we misspeak on this, is we think branding means one thing and say one thing over and over again and everybody repeat the exact same message. But it's not. Good community branding is about versatility. So going through and being able to tie into this idea of that outdoor recreation, a phrase that came out during one of our input meetings, I love this, West Branch, more trees than people. You know, that's a concept that's very, very appealing to some of those people that are making that travel corridor. And even if we're tying in, and I didn't want to do too much with the Bigfoot stuff, but being able to play around with this idea of how do we take this and create some standards in that merchandising so there is some brand consistency in that merchandising push. So now all of a sudden, what you start to see is you start to see actual graphic tools that coordinate with those overall value initiatives that we're shooting for in the community. Does that make sense? So again, though, if we stopped there, we wouldn't be going deep enough because we've only hit this overall community destination brand. So we want to dig into these organization brands. Now I'm going to go through this pretty quick because, again, this is a weird process. I design a lot of things without permission. So anybody who's offended, I apologize. But I feel like it's so important for these organizations to see that visually appearing to be working together goes a long way in people's minds. So I wanted to start out with the city. The city currently has a city seal, and it's the arrowhead design. The city seal, that's a graphic tool that is very, very, I mean, it exists in pretty much every place, but that's not always what you need to be using as your logo. A lot of times those might be dictated by charter. Changing a seal sometimes takes an act of Congress. So being able to have a slightly slicker, slightly more adaptable community logo is something that we think is really important. So from the city standpoint, we simply wanted something really clean, almost a little bit corporate, because we wanted to really realize that this is an entity that is delivering services to their constituents. I wanted to do something that tied into the Ogama Hills, that paid this kind of homage to the West Branch of the Rifle River, and also this idea of kind of an optimistic look towards the future. So again, super clean, super simple, but it gives us that opportunity to start to have a slightly different identity for that government itself. Now, as I drove into town, one of the things that was probably seemed the most disjointed to me was the billboard for the industrial park with the smiley face Wilder Tower on it. So there's some really interesting business going on in the industrial park. We want to make sure that that industrial park identity matches along with that economic development focus. So this shows what something might look like for an industrial park logo. And then again, you can notice here it says location, location, vacation, location. You know, this idea that site selection is starting to value quality of life and placement a lot more. Your simple interstate access isn't the same value set that it might have been before. So being able to understand that focusing on investing in quality of life is one of our best economic development tactics here, because that will be the thing that will help us to nurture a workforce that wants to work because they passionately want to be here. So I think it's kind of a big message and a really little thing. Again, even looking at things like the airport, using that same word type, leaning on those colors to connect those together. The Visitors Bureau. The Visitors Bureau, one of the biggest things that happens with Visitors Bureaus is they know that there's this entity, but people don't necessarily really care too much about the organization itself. We wanted to separate out the Visitors Bureau as a group from the Destination brand. You know, a lot of the stuff that we showed with Destination brand is the stuff that the Visitors Bureau would be pushing. But then just kind of creating a simple organizational logo for them saying, hey, we're the ones that orient the visitor. Like, that's our job. We're telling that story. We're putting heads in beds. Looking out at the Chamber of Commerce, I design a lot of Chambers logos. Being able to go in and just kind of have that simple reference back to the compass and the pointing north. This simple icon. The funny thing is there's this thing that I call chamber diplomacy, where a chamber will start out with a certain name and then they'll continue to expand their name to expand their relevancy. Luckily, you all have only made it to the West Branch Area Chamber of Commerce instead of the greater West Branch Regional Area Chamber of Commerce, like some do. But one of the big things that I always tell chambers is you have to realize locally, everybody knows that you're the chamber. So having a different set of logos, being able to have one that just says the chamber real big is completely okay. You don't have to have your entire accordion style name in every single logo that you do to be able to get that name recognition. And then this next one is a little bit different because it goes out and starts to look at the Ogama County EDC. And the EDC is obviously a countywide entity, but we do think that there's some true benefit to being able to tie in off of that same system. So again, looking at those color palettes, being able to use that system, but then still have something that's uniquely theirs. And this is really just a start. This next slide shows just some of the other entities and organizations and governments that surround us that could potentially be players in this system. So I just kind of wanted to play that and kind of throw that out there. Then from an organizational standpoint, because of all these groups, one of the other concepts that we really want to throw out tonight is this idea of what we call the economic development game plan. A lot of communities are really good at talking about economic development, but they're not really good about understanding how the handoff happens. You can never forecast where the conversation's going to start. So how do we map that handoff? How do we make sure that the communities know how to take a prospect and turn them into a business owner? So this is really just a concept that I think we'll kind of flush out as it goes, but I think the idea of kind of coordinating, I think a lot of times communities are convinced that all you have to do is go out and ask a business to come, and the reason why the businesses haven't come is because they haven't been asked. When in reality, the best thing that we can do is to be ready to respond the moment that a business shows any interest and make sure that we have the proper smooth transitions from organization to organization. One of the things that I was kind of thinking about with this is it might even be that what this does is this generates something that we call the huddle. And the huddle's not an organization, but the huddle is, hey, there's been a prospect and all the players need to come together. And it's just identifying that way for us to become ready to respond. So that was something to kind of play around with there. Now, To me, this is where it really gets fun. So we've seen the destination, we've seen the organizations, but the events are where the community truly gets life. It's where people fall in love with a place. And oftentimes what happens is the volunteers who are involved in a particular event, they're working in a vacuum, they're doing their stuff, and to a lot of times they're like, oh, we need to redesign the logo from the one that we designed last year because we want it to be new and fresh. So the consumer is literally having different messaging and different image hitting them every single year. So what I did is I just went through and picked out a couple of the events that I thought were really, really interesting that go on here in the community and showed how they might roll into this identity system. So we're going to start out with the Art and Wine Walk. So again, just being able to use the colors, use the typeface, roll that in. And you'll see, because I'm clever, right? Toast happy. Oh, it gets better than that. The puns, they will come. This at Maple Syrup Festival, I don't know who's in charge of this. I don't know who decided to do this. This is one of my favorite things ever. It might just be a really fancy pancake breakfast, but I'm truly digging this activity. Poor happy, right. Quilt walk, so happy, right? No, this next one's gonna knock you on your feet then. Sheer happiness, right? But see, one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is once you have the foundation in play, once you have those certain components that are defined, the certain confinements, restrictions. I don't really want to think of them as restrictions. I always kind of think about this idea, and I think there's even a passage in the Bible that talks about this idea that without the banks, if water is unconstrained, it's a flood, and just putting just enough there so you can move, you can go somewhere. Literally everything that you're seeing so far has been created since yesterday because the system makes the decisions a lot easier. And then it almost kind of highlights the individuality from event to event because you don't have to sit there and think about, oh, well, it's a lamb and wool event. So let me see if there's a typeface that has an L that has a lamb head on it. So it provides just enough for us to be efficient. Now, what I try to do with the event extension, though, is I also try to show everything doesn't have to be super strict. You don't have to use an element from every single one of those facets. So this next one, Pioneer Power, I went and I selected a different typeface that for the main typeface. We're still using the color palette. We're still using the secondary, but it gives them an opportunity to have something that maybe is a little bit more appropriate for their audience. Classy Chassis, one of the coolest names that I've seen for a car show. And again, we're using the secondary, we're using the color palettes, but we're allowing a signature script that kind of falls out of that overall system. Even looking at the rodeo, and I will say, yeah, I understand if what I read is right. Super Kicker is it's a rodeo series and you just host one here. But in my mind, there's no reason you can't have your own variation when an event's going on here, especially if you're doing the marketing for it. So what you start to see is the individuality is preserved in these events, but now there's a thread that truly is connecting together the positive experiences. And I heard while I was here, nothing ever happens in West Branch. And it's like, this is about half of the events that were on the list, some of which I was like, okay. I mean, the Victorian Art Fair, they've got a really nice kind of all script logo. I was like, I like that. You don't have to change that. Like, it's on signs that go on band shells and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to change everything to be able to adopt a connected system. But then moving into this last angle, this is some of the stuff that I think is pretty fun too. I'm a big believer that one of the biggest benefits of a brand system should be directly to our businesses. Businesses should be able to create merchandise that allow people to connect to the community. We heard in the merchants meeting a little bit about as the Bigfoot message was adopted, you guys got a Bigfoot wine, and from the moment that it made its way there, it was the best seller. People want to find some sort of connection to a place. So being able to have merchandise that your consumers want is really important. I've got 5 kids. I remember when my first daughter asked me for a Swell bottle, and it was kind of the way that you would imagine a child would come and ask if you were going to buy them a car. And I was like, you want a water bottle? Sure, I'll get you a water bottle. And it's like $45 later. I was like, what is up with this water bottle? Apparently they have fairies in them that magically keep things hot and cold. But, you know, the reason why I always show something like this is it illustrates a very important concept for us. It illustrates a concept that we call brand co-oping. So when most people make merchandise, they have one and only one factor that is their leading decision maker: price point. They're going to make a shirt. They're going to go and figure out what's the cheapest shirt I can get, and then make it from there. They're going to go and make a, some sort of thermos or something. They're going to find the cheapest one, put their logo on it, and then sell it. This is already a premium item. So when you put your brand alongside the premium brand, some of the known value of the premium brand transfers over to yours. If you want to position your community to be an access point for outdoor recreation, go out and buy 20 Patagonia vests, and they're going to be expensive, and then put West Branch logos right next to the Patagonia logos. And all of a sudden, you start to transfer those values. So I wanted to illustrate that because that is pretty important for some of our businesses. Simple things, reusable shopping bags. I'm a big fan of merchandise, but please do not make car wash t-shirts. Most communities, if you have a shirt from your community, it is one of those horrible shirts that has like 7,000 logos on the back. And the only time you're ever going to wear it is if you're cutting grass or painting something. This is a whole different kind of apparel. This is market-driven, well-designed apparel that consumers want to own. So I'm showing kind of a female design, a male design, doing hats, just any kind of things that people are excited about having. And even making the way into things like coffee mugs. And it becomes a system where every single business has access to the resources and then can decide what products their consumers might want. And then the final thing that I want to share with you is just some concepts for marketing. I think one of the best conversations that we had over the course of the week was we started to talk about proximity. And we started to talk about how much of a competitive advantage West Branch's location was. But you have to be really, really careful about how you phrase that. You don't want to say that it's easy to get to Detroit or Traverse City from West Branch. You want to say it's easy to get to West Branch. And one of the big things too was, this is the place. We heard the gateway to the north. We heard that phrase a ton. That concept is important, but you don't ever want to say that because like 18 other communities have said it. What you want to do is you want to make that value statement of why being the closest way that you can access the north is so beneficial to folks. With messages kind of like this: up north before lunch. So it's like, oh wait, it doesn't have to be this all day endeavor. And then this next one I think is kind of fun. 9 a.m. meeting, 1 p.m. unmeeting. And if you've ever sat through a 9 a.m. meeting like we did all week, the idea of literally having nothing to do or just being out in the middle of nowhere is a really, really appealing thing. And I do think that that is a big value that you all give to folks. Now, One of the other big things that we kind of landed on, and I think is important to say out loud, is the idea of Michigan's north is a very interesting concept. It's a destination that is widely known, but it's also the kind of place that it is expected that the visitor is going to put in effort. Everything is not expected to be perfectly paved. Everything is not expected to be laid out where, there'll be a shuttle that'll pick you up every 3 minutes. There's some effort, there's some planning, there's some thought. There's a certain amount of, hey, you can experience the North, but you're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to work for it. And I think that that's a good thing, but I do think that if you are going to use this idea of it being a convenient place to get to, there's going to need to be a little bit of convenience that converts into your access as well. I think that you need to, it's not good enough to just say, hey, we invite you to come to our community and then figure everything out all on your own. Being able to tell the story, but then also focus in on the process, focus in on the access, so that you create an experience that people are really excited about. We heard loud and clear that many, many people are familiar with West Branch, and a lot of them think that they know everything you have to offer because they've seen the outlets and the gas station. I know that can be frustrating, but that's actually a really great opportunity, because what that means is you have a whole other side of the story to tell. People think they know, and then you tell them the rest. That disjoints them. It shakes them up a little. People do not like to feel like they didn't know everything. They have a tendency to want to know the whole picture. And I think that's really working in your favor. Does that make sense? All right, so that's what I was able to do since yesterday. So at this point, I'd love to open it up for your thoughts. From an overall strategy standpoint, from the general approach of the kind of look and feel and the strategy that we are presenting to connect organizationally and start to create the stage for telling the story. I mean, what are your thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
When you were talking about when they get, how would you propose that we do that?
So a combination of that is going to be just the extension of implementing the wayfinding signage. Anytime you have a good comprehensive wayfinding system, that is a very, very big part of that. But then also understanding how visitors are finding information. I had a great time to chat with the folks at Highway and learn a little bit more just about this. Like I asked the question, how are people finding the brewery? And their answer was what I was hoping they were going to say. A lot of people are simply Googling brewery in Google Maps. So knowing how people are finding things. If you want people to come here for trails, where are they stopping and fueling up? Do you have information freely available to the access points of where you want them to go? How are you curating that experience so that you're making sure that that visitor is stopping along the ways where they can spend dollars instead of just the beeline? And I think that information flow is one of the things that is really important for us. I have to be honest, though. I think that we're talking a lot on a very, very positive level about the community. I hope that it comes through in everything that I've shared and shown. I really like West Branch. I think this is a cool place. I love how it feels. I've gotten to meet some really, really cool people here. You do have some challenges. You have some economic challenges. You have some workforce challenges. I'm not naive to that, but you have to start somewhere. And one of the best places to start is with activities that people really love doing. So, a lot of times we would start to have these conversations about outdoor recreation access, and people are like, well, that's all well and good, but we need jobs. And that's kind of like the way to kill any good, productive conversation is, we need jobs. Okay, so we're kind of working on that. And this actually can be a job creator. No, we don't want those kind of jobs. We want jobs that make more money. Okay, I understand that too, but we got to get consumers. We got to grow the overall market. And it is a good way because it's tapping into resources that you have. I'm going to outline as I move towards the final delivery package some of the other support marketing materials that will help to orient along the way. But some of the things that I'm going to show are, and I just didn't have time to design them, I think that using banners, street banners, to help people understand that they haven't seen everything yet, and being able to kind of show them through a very strategic banner deployment strategy, you use that to help people understand how to navigate through the community and how to see everything that you have to offer. So I'm going to throw all that stuff in there. Any other questions or thoughts?
Out here on the business group,
Good.
coming to town,
Good.
that would be a great way to get that going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions? Thoughts? Tomatoes? Yeah.
I mean, once this is said and done, you go home. Can you give us like a few low-hanging fruits? What are some of the few things that we can do right away to make a big difference?
So, I mean, one of the best things, honestly, we talked about banners already. Bang for buck from a visual standpoint. Once a brand gets adopted by a community, street banners are a super easy win because people notice them, and if done right, they do make an impact automatically. There are a lot of really interesting things that banners can do in terms of shrinking the visual cone, slowing traffic down a little bit, and things like that. One of the other things that I'm going to share with you all is I've actually created a full implementation matrix, all the components that are necessary for a well thought out rollout. They're not in order because every community is a little different, but I will go through and highlight some of the ones that I think are the low-hanging fruit, the easy wins for you guys. The other thing that I'm going to give you all is a one-pager called How to Be a Brand Partner. And this is actually a piece that it shares some of the brand components with the business community and the community event organizers and gives a whole host of suggestions on ways that they might be a partner and integrate this in to their own messaging. So I would say the combination of some of those kind of easy, low-cost wins, you've tackled a lot of the hard stuff. You know, the continuation on implementation on the branding, the wayfinding. And I do want to hit on wayfinding because I do this all over the country. I had a couple people ask me, is it weird, is it wrong that the wayfinding has different typeface, has, slightly different messaging on it? And the answer to that is absolutely not at all. The wayfinding system that you guys are rolling out is very well designed and it's good. And wayfinding systems last a lot longer than consumer-oriented branding systems do. So at some point in the game, you're going to be disjointed no matter what. The fact is, we were able to look at the colors, we were able to look at those components, and we were able to create something that could sing in concert. So continue on with the hard work you've done from that standpoint. I think it's a really, really good start on all that. And then one of the other things I think is pretty fair to say is some of the websites need a little cleanup. The web presence could be bumped up a notch in some, and it doesn't have to be everybody, but there are definitely some places. I know the Visitors Bureau site probably is one of the more polished of the family. Yeah, you know exactly what that means. So, Mandy.
How long does a branding system?
So with the system that I'm suggesting here, based off the typeface selections, I actually think you can get some pretty long life off of things like color palette and typeface. You might find that from a messaging and even some of the graphic standpoint, you might want to look at a refresh in 5 to 7 years. Sometimes they last a lot longer than that. Sometimes if a community is experiencing significant investment and change, you want to revisit it a little shorter than that. I've got some that are pushing 12 and 14 years and still using the primary graphic system. And with everything that I'm showing, I don't feel like anything is so edgy that it's going to get outdated. I don't think that the system is going to be something that's going to become stale. I think it's more likely that you'll just want to evolve your messaging as you go. Any other thoughts? Opinions? Good. Thank you.
Very impressed with the
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at timetable. I mean,
Yep.
You're gonna finish the roll package, and then at that time, I mean, is it all holds bars, like, here we go, let's roll with it? I mean, go, or, I mean, is that part of your, how you're rolling?
So one of the things that, and let me walk you through a little bit about what next steps look like, what deliverable looks like, and then how you go from there. So there's the Project Rising Tide has created a branding subcommittee, and Heather's leading that branding subcommittee. Tomorrow, I'm going to make this presentation available on YouTube. We're going to give a window of time, typically 2 weeks or so, for folks to take a look at it, then share feedback back through Heather. She'll reconvene that branding subcommittee. They'll review the refinements and then essentially give me a punch list of what they want me to do to move this towards final. Once it's completed, every single logo you see is yours. I have purchased the typefaces. I will define all the colors. I'm going to create a style guide document that will clearly define all those elements. Everything is going to be shared to you through a single digital link. All the logos get saved into 5 different file formats. So if you are kind of a graphics nerd or own a company, you know, like you're getting the vector versions, you're getting all the tools that you need there. All the photography that I do, all that stuff becomes yours. From a rollout strategy standpoint, typically one of the first things that you want to do is you want to start to have any of the organizational adoptions that need to go through, have that process start. But from a destination brand standpoint, the thing that I would say is the moment that the community has green-lighted the toolkit, start to implement. People get all hung up with some sort of launch event. They want to have a big party. They want to do this kind of stuff. Start using it. Start using it the moment you get it. And then what happens is, as you simply integrate it into the things that you already are doing, you're starting to earn that credibility of implementation. And then maybe 6 months down the road, maybe a year down the road, maybe at a point when you have a really, really big event, maybe that's the time where you kind of formally launch it after it's already started to circulate. And then that way you can automatically earn that instant kind of trust that they said they were going to launch it, and now I start to see it everywhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
okay. Any other questions? Awesome. Yeah.
I have one question.
Go for it.
I don't know if this is a question, comment, how you want to. When you say pure Michigan, I think of up north.
Mhm.
So is there a way that West Branch, well, and yes, and very expensive, but quality, good places to go, you know what I mean? So is there a way that, like with up north, never felt so close, West Branch, that we should be tying in like the pure Michigan thing?
So my work in Michigan and my work with MEDC through the tourism division, I have found, nicest way to say, I have found that they would rather you not mess with a good thing. I think that what you just suggested is a really great idea. I think that if there is a way that comes out that makes sense for us to tie in our local messaging, state level messaging, we should do that. I've had a lot of difficulty figuring out a way that they thought was good. Yep. Yeah. We did a brand system for downtown Saline, Michigan, and we had a very simple tagline. We had a similar question that was kind of asked, hey, could we adapt and have one that integrated pure into the tagline? And we kind of floated it up, and they were like, no, we'd rather not. So I'll play around with it. Obviously, I've got a connection with MEDC, so if there's I'm more than happy to float it.
I
But
don't even know if it needed, I don't know if anybody else thinks that too, you know what I mean, when the commercials come on.
I mean, here's the thing that I'll tell you from an outsider. Pure Michigan is one of the two best state tourism campaigns that around, between that and Virginia's for Lovers. And when you look at how young Pure Michigan is compared to how long Virginia for Lovers, I mean, it's been around since 1969. So, you know, it's one of those things where they've done an excellent job. They've done an excellent job with awareness. And I think that Pure Michigan, even though it was targeted on speaking to people outside the state, they've done an amazing job at stoking that local pride. And people in Michigan are proud of the Pure Michigan campaign. We want to replicate all of that stuff. And if there's an opportunity for us to tap into it, why not?
Other communities have though, I mean, you have Pure Ludington, I mean, they have billboards of Pure Ludington on that. I'm just curious on that process. And I don't know how important that is to us.
Yeah.
But it, you know, so it is done, I mean, they have done it, and I just, to follow up with her question, what is that sequence of events? How does that?
Ludington adopted, asked forgiveness. Mine's, yeah.
Okay. Because Ann Arbor tried it too, and that kind of went away real quick.
Yeah, and the other thing I think that's a little weird about it though is like if you know it's that popular and you know other people are already doing it, then you know how much do you want to a certain degree when you decide to align with someone else's campaign, you're aligning with every facet of their campaign. And if the overwhelming majority of the messaging that comes out of Pure Michigan when you refer to North is sending people to Traverse City, sending them to Mackinac Island, then you know maybe that alignment isn't helping us with the messaging that we're shooting for. But again, all those questions.
The beginning of what we're
There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. I mean, Grayling, you know, their overwhelming focus was around the canoe marathon and using canoe imagery to connect themselves in. Harrison, over to the west of us, was very much focused on the lakes and kind of this being kind of the hometown of the series of lakes. As I'm trying to think what else would hit in that way. You know, as you start to get west, things change. You know, Charlevoix and that kind of stuff. And then, you know, when you start to get out, like I think about Sandusky, but it's in the Thumb, so the Thumb's like a completely different place. So the thing is, there's a lot of communities, they want to incorporate the concept of North because they know it brings positive meaning behind it, but then they get lazy. It's like they say, we're up north, and then they stop and they don't do anything else. They just kind of walk away from it. Where I wanted to be able to create something that was more of a system that was, because of its simplicity, kind of force you to feel compelled to tell more of the story, to use it more to connect the dots. Awesome. Thank you so much. Great. Oh, good.
Can we just
Good.
record his voice? Yeah.
The weird thing is I don't sound like I'm from Michigan, so I don't know. You know, we might be able to get Tim the Toolman Taylor to, you know, doesn't he do the Pure Michigan ads?
No, the whole southern accent was what we needed for that intro. I see that on YouTube video already, and I
Nice.
think we're gonna probably steal it. So.
No. Any other questions? We're hitting right at 5 o'clock. I always like to try to keep this as close to an hour as possible. I want to thank everybody for all of your time over the past two visits, and those of you that have spent numerous hours with me this week, I appreciate it. Those of you who literally have just been born, thank you for joining the community. You know, I will tell you, this is the first time in a nearly 20-year career that I've had a 4-day-old come to an input meeting. So,
More importantly, we haven't heard a peep out of the 4 days.
I know. The sad thing is, I've definitely had some focus group meetings where folks acted like 4-day-olds, but I think that you guys you're tackling some pretty hard issues. You're getting into the meat of the stuff that needs to be discussed and focused on to be able to truly change the trajectory and own the future of your community. I'm excited about what you're working on. I'm excited about some of the results that seem to be coming out from Project Rising Tide. I was able to sit in on some of the data about the housing study, and you know, I'm excited about some of the numbers and some of the potential there for being able to create opportunities for new residents here. I do believe, and I feel like I've seen it happen in places this size and smaller, that being able to use the natural surroundings to help you take control of your own economy, it totally makes sense. We truly live in a very, very different place these days, where if people are able to do the things that they love, they figure out ways to live there. And it still seems a little off for some of those of us that are older and more connected with a more traditional industrial development mindset. But communities, time and time again, big and small, all over America, are truly focusing in on harnessing that outdoor passion and converting it into economic drivers. So I'm excited for you. Thank you. I will be back in the next couple of weeks just because I'm doing some work down in Gladwin and Beaverton. And then hopefully as soon as we get the green light on all the package, we'll get the tools right back in your hands. And if there's anything else I can help with, I'm always happy to. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.